Imagine standing on the bridge of a warship so advanced, so deadly, that entire armadas scatter at the mere whisper of its name. A vessel so legendary that for centuries it was believed to be nothing more than a myth, a fabrication of battlefield folklore. But what happens when a myth turns out to be real? What happens when the ghost of war, long dismissed as a legend, suddenly appears in the heart of a battlefield and turns the tide of war in an instant? The galaxy is vast, a tapestry of countless empires, each vying for dominance. In the endless void, technology defines power, and power dictates survival. Wars are fought over resources, territories, and ideologies. But sometimes, a war is won by a single, unstoppable force. This is the story of a warship that defied history, a phantom vessel feared by admirals and whispered about in war councils. Its existence was ridiculed, its capabilities dismissed as impossible, until it emerged from the shadows and proved them all wrong. Centuries before its return, the warship was nothing more than a legend. Star commanders spoke of a vessel from the old wars, one that could phase in and out of existence, strike without warning, and disappear before retaliation. Some claimed it was an experimental prototype, lost in the depths of space. Others believed it had never existed at all, just another ghost story to keep soldiers on edge. The ship had many names across the star systems: the Phantom Leviathan, the Wraith of the Void. But those who claimed to have seen it and survived called it something else: the Black Revenant. But myths, as history often proves, are born from truth. The Revenant wasn't just a tale, it was real. A relic from a forgotten war, designed with technology far beyond its time. And while the galaxy moved on, forging new alliances and waging new wars, the Revenant remained hidden. Until one fateful day, it returned. And when it did, entire fleets burned in its wake. Before we dive into this incredible story, here's something important. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, HFY Chronicles-849 is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. Now, back to the mystery of the Black Revenant. It all started with an invasion. The Zithar Dominion, one of the most feared warlords in the known galaxy, had set their sights on the Arcturus sector, a rich, strategic region, home to dozens of human colonies and vital trade routes. The Dominion was ruthless, their fleets vast, their warriors relentless. Resistance was futile. The Terran defense forces scrambled to defend their territory. But against the overwhelming firepower of the Zithar, their efforts were little more than a delay. Colony after colony fell, entire planets reduced to smoldering wastelands. The war was lost before it had even begun. Then, on the eve of what was to be the Dominion's final assault, something impossible happened. Sensors detected an unidentified warship at the edge of the battlefield. No known registry, no allied transponder codes. The ship didn't broadcast any communications. It simply appeared and advanced straight toward the Dominion fleet. At first, the Dominion commanders dismissed it as a ghost signal, an anomaly in their targeting systems. But then, the ship opened fire. What happened next defied all known warfare. The first attack came without warning. No energy buildup, no missile launch, no detectable weapons fire. One moment, the Dominion's lead battleship, the Korzath, stood at the heart of the fleet. Its shields at full power, its weapons primed for planetary bombardment. The next, it was gone. Not destroyed in a fiery explosion, not torn apart by kinetic bombardment, just erased. The Dominion's fleet commanders scrambled to understand what had just happened. Their scanners showed no debris field, no energy signature consistent with an explosion. It was as if the Korzath had been erased from existence. Panic rippled through their ranks. They adjusted their scanners, activated emergency countermeasures, but before they could react, it happened again. Another warship, a heavily armored dreadnought, simply vanished. Then, the Revenant spoke. Its message cut through every frequency, overriding all encryption protocols. A deep, resonant voice echoed through the Dominion's command channels. Not a declaration of war, not a demand for surrender. Just 3 words. You were warned. The Zithar Dominion, for all its military might, had never faced anything like this. Their war doctrine relied on overwhelming force, brute strength that crushed opposition before it could resist. But how do you fight something that defies all known laws of physics? Their scanners detected no conventional weapon signatures. Their defenses, designed to withstand anything from high-energy plasma bursts to hyper-velocity railgun fire, were useless. The Black Revenant moved through their fleet like a phantom, each of its attacks claiming another warship without explanation. Then, the Dominion fleet attempted to strike back. Thousands of energy lances, torpedoes, and mass driver rounds converged on the Revenant's position. The firepower unleashed was enough to vaporize a moon. But when the firestorm cleared, the warship was untouched. It hadn't even raised shields. It simply phased through reality, slipping between dimensions as effortlessly as a shadow in the dark. Then it retaliated. With a single burst of energy, an unfamiliar, impossible form of matter displacement, 6 Dominion warships collapsed into themselves, folding into unnatural shapes before vanishing into the void. Their screams never reached command. Their crews never had a chance to eject. One moment, they existed. The next, they didn't. Now, the Zithar fleet faced a choice. Stand their ground and risk annihilation, or flee. For the first time in recorded history, the Dominion's supreme warlord ordered a retreat. The invasion of Arcturus was abandoned. What should have been the Dominion's final victory became the most humiliating defeat in their history. The Revenant didn't chase them. It didn't broadcast threats. It simply watched as the Dominion forces fled into the dark. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the Black Revenant was gone. No warp signatures, no hyperspace jump. Just gone. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted less than an hour. But its impact would be felt across the galaxy for centuries to come. The Dominion, once believed to be unstoppable, had been humbled by a single warship. A warship that was never supposed to exist. But if the Revenant was real, who built it? And why had it returned now? For days after the battle, the Dominion's surviving warlords convened in secrecy, desperate to understand what had just happened. The Black Revenant wasn't just an anomaly, it was an existential threat. If a single warship could dismantle an entire invasion fleet, then everything the Dominion had built, everything they had conquered, could be undone overnight. Their empire, forged through centuries of war and unchallenged supremacy, now faced something it could not explain. But even as fear gripped the Dominion's highest ranks, the rest of the galaxy erupted with speculation. News of the battle spread, like wildfire. The Arcturus sector, once doomed to fall under the Dominion's control, stood defiant, its people hailing the Revenant as a savior. The human colonies, which had braced for extinction, now had something they hadn't dared hope for. A legend of their own. Historians scrambled to search through old war archives, intelligence agencies scoured records, and Black Ops divisions, in every major empire, turned their attention to the mystery. Where had the Revenant come from? Why had it returned now, after centuries of absence? And perhaps the most terrifying question of all, if this ship existed, what else had been hidden in the void? Some believed it was an ancient Terran prototype, a weapon from a lost era of war. Humanity, after all, was known for its ingenuity and its defiance in the face of extinction. But even the most classified archives of the Terran Defense Forces held no records of such a vessel. The technology displayed was beyond anything even theoretical physics could explain. The ability to phase in and out of existence? The instantaneous erasure of warships without a trace? This wasn't just advanced weaponry. This was a force that rewrote the very fabric of reality. Others turned to the past, to the oldest myths recorded by humanity and alien civilizations alike. Stories of precursor races that had vanished long before the rise of modern empires. Artifacts and ruins scattered across the galaxy, remnants of a time when beings far more powerful than any living species had shaped the cosmos. Could the Revenant be a relic of such a civilization? A weapon built by entities whose knowledge surpassed even the most ambitious scientific pursuits of the present age? But one theory stood above the rest. one that sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened warriors. The Revenant was not just a warship, it was a warning. Buried deep within ancient records, among the countless conflicts that had shaped the galaxy, were fragments of a legend. A shadowy tale spoken in hushed voices among elder scholars and dismissed by most as superstition. The legend of the Veilbreakers, an enigmatic force that had once intervened in galactic history, appearing only when the balance of power tipped too far in favor of a single dominant force. The legend spoke of ships that did not adhere to the laws of physics, of weapons that could erase civilizations with a whisper, of a force that ensured no empire could rule unchallenged. If the Revenant was real, then the Veilbreakers were real, and if they had returned, what did that mean for the future of the galaxy? Fear spread quickly. The Dominion wasn't the only empire that had sought unchecked expansion. The Kareth Ascendancy, the Vailari, Republic, the unified Draconis clans, every major power had, at some point, dreamed of total galactic dominance. If the Revenant was a manifestation of the Veilbreakers, then it meant one thing. There was a line that no empire could cross, and, the moment they did, the Revenant would return. But speculation wasn't enough. The Dominion refused to accept defeat at the hands of a phantom. Their warlords, humiliated before their own people, demanded retribution. They funneled resources into their most secretive research divisions, deploying their most brilliant scientists to uncover the Revenant's secrets. They combed the battlefield for any trace of its weaponry, analyzed sensor logs, and interrogated surviving fleet officers, desperate to understand what they had witnessed. And then, they found something. Buried within the shattered remains of their fleet's data logs was a single anomaly, an energy signature that had never been seen before. A signature so precise, so uniquely structured, that it could not have been a random fluctuation. It was a message, a set of coordinates embedded in the very fabric of the Revenant's attacks, hidden beneath the destruction it had left behind. The Dominion knew this was no accident. It was an invitation. But an invitation to what? Without hesitation, the Dominion assembled an elite task force, a fleet of their most advanced warships, loaded with experimental technology and their best strategists, set course for the coordinates. It was a risk, but the chance to uncover the Revenant's origin was too great to ignore. As the fleet approached the designated location, they expected to find a hidden base, perhaps an ancient ruin or a concealed shipyard. But what they found instead defied reason. A dead star system, a place where no life had ever existed, where the planets were nothing but barren, frozen husks orbiting the remnants of a collapsed sun. No structures, no space stations, nothing but darkness and silence. The Dominion commanders, confused and frustrated, scanned the area relentlessly. There was no sign of the Revenant, no trace of any civilization. It was as if they had been led into a void, into a trap. Then, just as they were about to retreat, the shadows moved, and the Black Revenant returned. The Dominion fleet barely had time to react. One moment, the dark void of space stretched before them, silent, empty, lifeless. The next, the shadows themselves seemed to stir, bending unnaturally, coalescing into a shape that had haunted their nightmares. The Black Revenant emerged from nothingness, its obsidian hull reflecting no light, its form outlined only by the faint distortion it created in space. But something was different this time. It was not attacking. It simply waited. For tense moments, the Dominion's commanders hesitated, unsure of what to do. This was their chance, to study the warship up close, to understand what they were dealing with. Yet every instinct screamed at them that they had walked into something far beyond their comprehension. The Revenant had led them here. But why? Admiral Varkesh, the highest-ranking officer of the Dominion's elite task force, made a decision. Against the protests of his subordinates, he ordered his fleet to hold fire. This was not an enemy they could simply destroy with brute force. He had seen that firsthand. No. If the Revenant wanted them here, then they would see this through. Cautiously, his flagship, the Ziran's Wrath, edged closer. The closer they got, the more their sensors failed. Energy readings fluctuated wildly, gravity itself seemed inconsistent, and some crew members reported hearing whispers, though there was no possible source. The deeper they ventured, the more it felt as though reality itself was unraveling. Then, without warning, a transmission came through. Not an attack, not a demand, but a vision. The bridge of the Ziran's wrath was consumed by a sudden burst of data. Images, voices, fragmented recordings of something far older than any known civilization. The crew convulsed as their minds were bombarded with knowledge too vast, too alien for them to comprehend. Some collapsed, unable to withstand the sheer magnitude of what they were witnessing. Others screamed in horror. For Admiral Varkesh, it was something else entirely. A glimpse into the past. A past that should not have existed. He saw it. An ancient war, fought in the void beyond time. Not between mortal empires, but between forces that defied understanding. Titans of unimaginable power clashed across the cosmos, bending space and time to their will. Entire star systems were obliterated in an instant, reduced to nothing but cosmic debris. The very fabric of existence trembled beneath the weight of their battle, and then the Veilbreakers appeared, not as conquerors, not as destroyers, but as the last defense against annihilation. They were not one species, nor one empire. They were something beyond classification, an order sworn to uphold balance, to prevent any force from tipping the scales of existence too far. Their warships, like the Revenant, moved between realities, striking down those who sought to dominate the stars unchecked. They had existed before history, before recorded time, before even the Dominion's oldest ancestors had crawled from their primordial worlds. The war had ended in devastation. The galaxy, scarred beyond recognition, was reset. And then, the Veilbreakers vanished. Their fleets dissolved into myth, their purpose fulfilled. The galaxy was left to rebuild, to start anew. But before they faded into legend, one final warning was left behind, a failsafe. Should any empire grow too bold, should any force seek absolute rule, the Veilbreakers would return. The Black Revenant was proof of that. Admiral Varkesh gasped as the vision faded, his body trembling. He could feel it, an undeniable truth settling in his bones. The Dominion had stepped too far. Their thirst for conquest, their belief in their own invincibility. It had triggered something ancient, something that could not be reasoned with. The vision ended. The Revenant remained motionless before them. A silent specter, waiting, testing them. Varkesh faced a choice unlike any before. He could order an attack, knowing full well that no Dominion weapon could harm this entity. Or, he could accept the truth. With a heavy heart, he activated his fleet-wide comms. "We leave," he declared, his voice steadier than he felt. Now. His officers hesitated, stunned by the order. To flee, to abandon their mission? But then the Revenant moved. No weapons fired. No threats were made. But in an instant, the fleet's shields fluctuated, their hulls groaning as though space itself rebelled against them. It was a warning, a final chance to make the right choice. Varkesh didn't hesitate again. All ships, retreat. Full speed, the fleet turned, engines blazing, pushing toward the nearest jump point. They expected pursuit, an attack, some final act of retribution. But none came. The Revenant merely watched, its form slowly fading once more into the darkness, as if it had never been there at all. The Dominion fleet escaped. But the war was over before it had even begun. For the first time in history, the Dominion abandoned its campaign. The invasion of Arcturus was erased from their records, their defeat never spoken of in official reports. Every warlord who had pushed for expansion suddenly withdrew, their fleets recalled to home systems. They spoke in whispers, fearful of what might happen if they pushed forward again. And throughout the galaxy, the story spread. The Black Revenant was no longer a myth. It was real. It was watching. And it had delivered its warning. But the greatest mystery remained. If the Revenant had returned, did that mean the Veilbreakers had awakened once more? And if they had, what else lay waiting in the dark? The Dominion fleet's retreat was a humbling, wordless surrender. No official declaration was made, no negotiations were attempted. The High Warlords, once so confident in their campaign to claim the Arcturus sector, fell silent. Some called it fear, others pragmatism. But those who had seen the Black Revenant firsthand knew better. It was something more than fear. It was the realization that they had encountered a force so far beyond them that their entire empire, mighty as it was, had been weighed, measured, and found wanting. They had believed themselves to be the dominant power in the galaxy, but now they understood. They were merely children playing at war while titans watched from the abyss. But while the Dominion retreated, the rest of the galaxy stirred. Word of the encounter spread in hushed whispers, traveling faster than official channels could suppress. Merchants, smugglers, rogue AI networks, each carried fragments of the story to distant worlds, piecing together what had happened. The Black Revenant, long dismissed as legend, had returned. For some, it was a sign of hope. For others, a warning. Historians, scholars, and secret societies across the galactic core scrambled to make sense of the event. Could it be true? Could the myths of the Veilbreakers, warriors who had existed beyond time, be more than stories? Ancient star maps were unearthed, some older than recorded civilization itself, revealing cryptic markings where no stars should have been. Forgotten ruins on distant moons, long thought to be relics of extinct civilizations, were suddenly re-examined, their strange inscriptions now taking on a sinister new meaning. And in the deepest corners of the galaxy, hidden from the eyes of governments and empires, there were those who had always known. They were the Silent Watchers, reclusive orders of scientists, archivists, and rogue elements who had spent centuries gathering lost knowledge, piecing together fragments of the past. They had long suspected that the Veilbreakers had never truly vanished, only gone dormant. Waiting. Now, their worst fears were confirmed. Among them was a name spoken only in secrecy: Project Obsidian. Long before the Dominion's rise, before even the formation of the first galactic alliances, Project Obsidian had been a whisper in the dark, a conspiracy that few dared to investigate. Some believed it had been an attempt to create superweapons. Others claimed it was a failed experiment in AI-driven warships. But those who knew the real story understood the terrifying truth. Project Obsidian had been humanity's attempt to understand the Black Revenant. Over 500 years earlier, deep within an uncharted region of space, an exploratory vessel had encountered something impossible, an abandoned warship unlike anything ever recorded. Its hull was crafted from a material that defied conventional physics, absorbing all scans, bending light in unnatural ways. Its systems, long dormant, pulsed with an eerie, residual energy that suggested it was neither fully mechanical nor biological, but something in between. The researchers who studied it never returned. What little data was recovered spoke of hallucinations, electromagnetic disturbances, and an overwhelming sense that they were being watched, even though no life forms were present. The project was shut down, its records sealed, its findings classified under the highest level of secrecy. The ship itself vanished, and now it had returned. For the Dominion, the message was clear: stand down or be erased. But for others, it was something else entirely. The mere existence of the Black Revenant confirmed something that had only been theorized in classified military circles. There were forces in the galaxy operating beyond known science, beyond even the comprehension of the most advanced civilizations. And if the Revenant had been reawakened, what else had been set in motion? The leaders of the great civilizations faced a choice: to ignore the warnings of the past and continue their struggles for power, or to heed the message and prepare for something far greater than political dominance. But warlords are seldom wise. Despite the Dominion's withdrawal, other empires saw weakness. If the Dominion had been brought to its knees, then perhaps it was time for another to take its place. Some viewed the Revenant as a myth meant to keep governments in check, a phantom created to instill fear. Others believed that if such a warship truly existed, it could be harnessed, controlled, made into a weapon of supreme power. A faction known as the Veldari Syndicate, notorious for its ruthless technology scavenging, saw opportunity. Unlike the Dominion, who feared the Black Revenant, The Veldari sought to claim it. They were a collective of rogue scientists, AI warlords, and cyber-enhanced mercenaries. An unholy fusion of organic and machine intelligence, driven by their insatiable hunger for lost technology. And they had been watching. They had intercepted the Dominion's fragmented distress signals, analyzed the encrypted data streams, and studied every known myth about the Revenant. They saw something others did not. A chance. The Dominion had recoiled in terror, but the Veldari, they would pursue. From the shadows of the galactic frontier, their most advanced fleet, the Eclipse Armada, was mobilized. Their directive was simple: track the Revenant, find its origin, and, if possible, claim its power for themselves. But they did not understand what they were hunting, for the Black Revenant was no mere warship. It was a sentinel, a harbinger, and its return was only the beginning. The Veldari Syndicate's fleet moved with precision, their armada slipping through the dark void like phantoms. Each ship was a marvel of hybrid engineering, sleek hulls lined with reactive armor, weapon systems powered by scavenged alien technology, and neural-linked command centers that allowed the ship's AI to process tactics faster than any organic mind could comprehend. They were not an empire like the Dominion, nor a lawful government. They had no borders, no official homeworld. They were a shadow empire, existing within the fractures of galactic order, feeding on conflict, always hungry for more power. And now, their target was the Black Revenant. High Commander Rizek, a cyber-augmented strategist feared across the galactic frontier, stood in the command chamber of the Eclipse Prime, the flagship of the Syndicate's fleet. Around him, data streams flickered in the air, processing every known trace of the Revenant: gravitational disturbances, electromagnetic distortions, and even the faintest particle shifts in subspace. Unlike the Dominion, the Syndicate did not fear the unknown. They sought to bend it to their will. The Dominion crumbled before this phantom, Rizek murmured, his voice cold and calculated. They saw a nightmare. We see an opportunity. The Syndicate's scientists had studied every legend, every encrypted file extracted from Dominion wreckage, every survivor's account. What they found only deepened their obsession. The Revenant was beyond anything ever recorded. Its structure, seemingly impervious to known weapons, its movement defying standard propulsion mechanics. But most intriguingly, it exhibited patterns of behavior that suggested something more than simple programming. It acted with intelligence. It anticipated enemy moves before they happened. It struck with precision, exploiting weaknesses as if it understood its opponents on an instinctual level. It fought as though it had a will of its own. This, Rizek believed, meant that the Revenant could be controlled. If it was a weapon, then there had to be a way to harness it. After all, no machine was truly unhackable. No system was beyond corruption. And so, the Eclipse Armada followed the remnants of the battle, scanning for any sign of where the Revenant had disappeared. The Dominion had failed to track it, but the Syndicate had no such limitations. They deployed deep space probes, activated ancient signal repeaters, and even used illegal quantum entanglement scans to pick up the faintest traces of its presence. Days passed, then weeks, until finally, a breakthrough. A signal. Faint, distorted, buried within the cosmic background noise of a dying star system. It wasn't a distress beacon. It wasn't an automated response. It was something else. A pattern. A message, if one knew how to read it. And the Syndicate did. Deciphering the signal led them to the edge of a forbidden sector, a place so ancient and uncharted that it wasn't even included in official star maps. The void here was different, deeper, darker, almost oppressive. Stars seemed dimmer, as though light itself struggled to escape. It was a place spoken of in whispers by deep space navigators and smugglers. The Dead Expanse. A region so treacherous that even the most reckless of explorers avoided it. Navigation systems malfunctioned. Ships disappeared without a trace. Some claimed it was haunted by remnants of a war older than recorded history. Others believed it was cursed. The Syndicate, of course, dismissed such notions. They were not superstitious. They were hunters of knowledge, masters of technology. But as they entered the expanse, even they felt something. The moment they crossed into the sector, the fleet's instruments glitched. Not a complete failure, but distortions, subtle anomalies in their readings. Chronometers lagged by fractions of a second. Gravitational sensors flickered between normal and unreadable. The very fabric of space seemed wrong. Then, they found the first wreckage. Massive hulks of ancient warships, some so degraded they were barely recognizable. These weren't Dominion vessels, nor were they from any known galactic empire. Their designs were alien, beyond anything recorded in historical archives. But the strangest thing was not their construction. It was their destruction. Each ship bore the same wounds, clean, precise cuts, as if they had been torn apart by a force that understood their exact weaknesses. There were no blast marks, no signs of brute force weaponry. Whatever had destroyed these ships had done so, with surgical precision. And the deeper they traveled, the more wreckage they found. Not just ships, but stations, colonies, entire structures that had once belonged to civilizations, now long forgotten. It was as if they had all gathered here for something. Some final battle. Some desperate last stand. Then, they saw it. At the heart of the wreckage, nestled within the hollow remains of a long-dead station, was the Black Revenant. Silent. Motionless. Waiting. Its dark hull gleamed under the distant light of a dying star, absorbing more light than it reflected, as if it existed between the boundaries of reality itself. Rysek's breath slowed. It was real. The legends were true. A cold smile spread across his face. Prepare the boarding teams. The Eclipse Armada moved into position. This was the moment they had prepared for. Their ships deployed containment fields, their AI systems running millions of simulations on how best to infiltrate the Revenant. Ryzek himself led the operation, believing that this victory, this moment, would be the greatest in Syndicate history. But as the boarding teams approached, something changed. The Revenant, which had been silent, suddenly pulsed, not with light, but with something else, something deeper. The very space around it seemed to ripple, like a mirage in a heat wave. Then came the first scream. Not from the boarding teams, from the Eclipse Armada's AI itself. Warning sirens blared across every Syndicate vessel. Screens flickered, systems shut down. The hyper-intelligent AI cores, designed to be immune to hacking, began broadcasting something. A message in no known language. The fleet's cybernetic officers twitched as if something unseen had invaded. Their neural implants. Rysek's mind reeled as he heard it. Not a distress call, not a warning, a whisper. From the ship itself. You were warned. Then, the Revenant moved. Not like any normal vessel. It did not engage thrusters. It did not turn. It shifted, as though space itself bent to accommodate its presence. Then, with impossible speed, it struck. Syndicate ships, powerful warcraft designed for dominance, were torn apart in an instant, not by weapons, by something far worse. Their hulls imploded, their matter dissolving into nothingness as if they had never existed. Entire crews vanished, their screams cut short before they could even comprehend their fate. The Eclipse Armada, feared across the galaxy, was reduced to silence in under a minute. The Revenant did not hesitate, did not negotiate, did not show mercy. It had been patient long enough. Now, it was awake. Ryzek barely had time to process what was happening before his ship, the Eclipse Prime, was caught in the Revenant's grasp. The flagship of the Veldari Syndicate, a vessel that had terrorized entire star systems, now trembled like an insect ensnared in a web. The bridge was in chaos, warning klaxons blaring as officers scrambled to make sense of the unfolding nightmare. "Report!" Ryzek barked, gripping the edge of his command console as the ship shuddered violently. No answer. His second-in-command, a hardened tactician named Vexir, turned to him, her augmented eyes wide with something Ryzek had never seen in her before. Fear. "Sir, the ship isn't responding." Ryzek's mind raced. That was impossible. The Eclipse Prime systems were designed with quantum failsafes, resistant to even the most advanced electronic warfare. The Revenant couldn't have simply shut them down. And yet, the screens flickered again, and suddenly, the bridge was bathed in darkness. Then, a voice, deep, resonant, and utterly inhuman, whispered through the comms. "I warned you." The Revenant had spoken before, but this was different. It was no longer just a whisper. It was a presence. The ship's interior lights flared erratically, casting eerie shadows as an unseen force invaded the Eclipse Prime systems. The crew screamed as their neural implants overloaded, minds collapsing under a weight they could not comprehend. Rizek clenched his teeth as pain lanced through his own cybernetic enhancements. Then, silence. Every screen aboard the ship now displayed the same thing. A single, unblinking eye. Not mechanical, not biological. Something beyond either. The Revenant wasn't just a warship. It wasn't an AI. It was alive, and it had judged them. The Eclipse Prime shuddered once more, but this time, not from an external force. The ship was changing. The very walls seemed to ripple, as if they were no longer solid metal, but something fluid, something organic. "Sir!" Vexir's voice cut off as she convulsed, her body distorting before collapsing into nothingness. The rest of the bridge crew suffered the same fate. One by one, they vanished, their bodies disintegrating into shadows before being consumed by the ship itself. The Revenant was absorbing them. Rizek staggered back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His mind, sharp and ruthless, fought against the terror clawing at him. He had seen countless enemies fall before him. He had commanded entire fleets. He had built an empire from the ashes of weaker civilizations. But now, none of that mattered. Because the Revenant had chosen him. The screens flickered again, and this time, he saw something new. A battlefield, stretching across the cosmos. Broken ships, lifeless planets, dead civilizations. A war that had raged long before the Dominion, long before the Syndicate, long before any of the empires now struggling to carve their place in the galaxy. A war where the Revenant had once been a weapon, but it was no longer a weapon. It was a survivor, the last remnant of something far older, far greater, and it had spent eons waiting, lurking in the void, seeking out those foolish enough to wake it. "You seek power," the voice whispered, cold and emotionless. "But you are unworthy." Rizek tried to resist, tried to summon the strength that had carried him through every battle, every conquest, but it was useless. The Revenant had already decided his fate. A piercing sound filled the bridge, an oscillating frequency that bypassed every neural defense he had. It wasn't just sound, it was information. A direct transmission into his mind, filling it with visions of endless destruction, of entire civilizations wiped from existence, of horrors beyond mortal comprehension. Rizek fell to his knees, hands clutching his skull as his own thoughts fragmented. He was no longer just Rizek. He was a vessel, a conduit for something far greater. The last thing he saw before his consciousness dissolved into the Revenant's will was the battlefield, and in the distance, another fleet approaching. The Syndicate had not come alone. Another galactic power, drawn by whispers of a lost legend, had sent their own forces to claim the Revenant. A new enemy, fresh and unprepared. The Revenant's hunger stirred once more. With a pulse of dark energy, the Eclipse Prime, now nothing more than an extension of the Revenant itself, turned toward its next prey. The legend was no longer a myth. The galaxy would soon learn the truth, and by the time they did, it would be too late. That concludes the story, but now it's your turn. What would you do if you were in Rizek's position? Would you try to control the Revenant, or would you flee the moment you realized the truth? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep space thriller, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to HFY Chronicles-849 for more epic tales of humanity's fight for survival in the stars. The void is vast and filled with secrets. Stay tuned for the next chapter.